welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're happy to have you. So you're the data platform engineering manager at Funding Circle. Can you tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so at Funding Circle, we provide loans and short-term credit to small businesses. I lead the data platform team, and what we do is we provide tools and services to people in the company to make it easy to work with data, because I mean, a lot of what we do is powered by data.
Okay, so why is it that there's a specific function just for the data platform rather than just having a data team, let's say?
Good question. To answer that, I probably have to take you through the history of how we got here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've been at Funding Circle for a while now.
Yeah, five years. I started as a data engineer in the data team.
Okay.
And now we're here.
Okay. So yeah, let's take a step back.
Let's dive in. So when I first started, we had a pretty small cross-functional emerging data team.
Okay.
Our main focus was to deliver some reports for our investors. And to do that, we had a pretty traditional pipeline, taking data from our operational database, put it in a data warehouse. Very traditional ETL. That was going well. And then the data warehouse started to get kind of bloated. Queries would start failing, they would start timing out, or just take like hours and hours to run. And kind of around the same time, the company wanted to invest more into data. Specifically, we wanted to acquire more data sources to power this instant decision engine that we were building. Essentially to decide, when a company makes an application, whether to give them a loan or not.
Okay.
And so to make that decision, we acquired a lot of third-party data sources like Companies House, credit bureaus, Experian, to get bank statements, credit scores, a variety of financial data to help make that decision.
Sure.
And so we had to put the data somewhere.
Okay.
And that is when we kind of naturally took the next step to evolve to a data lake. And so we ingested all of these data sources to put into the lake. We also moved our previous ETL for application data to the lake. So we had kind of this central place with all of the data. And then we kind of saw this blossoming of a lot more teams starting to use the data. So, for example, we had analysts who could then see how well our decision engine was doing. Like, did we make the right decision? How can we make the decision faster, easier? If we rejected someone, we could see, like, over time, did we make the right decision? Also, we had marketing teams who could then use like the influx of data to look at, our population of companies in the UK. What is the segmentation? What customers can we target? How do we advertise to them? When should we advertise to them, and through what channels? Okay. We also had data scientists who could, use this data to improve their risk models, and that would add another dimension to our decision engine to kind of predict whether someone would default on their loan or not.
That sounds like a very long journey summarized in very few words.
Yes.
So let's say you started with the reporting use case, right? And then you said that the data warehouse started getting bloated, and then you started to get third-party data sets. What is the milestone that led you to decide, we need to go to a data lake?
So the combination of the data warehouse kind of being untenable, and then having the business requirements of having all the data sources coming in, it was just not a practical solution to then continue with that traditional ETL to put in the data warehouse. As well, With the third-party financial data, it's a little more complex. It's deeply nested. It's usually file-based, so it's natural for it to be on the data lake.
So the fact that it was unstructured and the fact that they were files and not tables led you to believe that, okay, we need to ingest these in the lake first and then execute the ETL processes on top of them and then take a subset of that into the data warehouse.
Kind of, yes. Okay. We also moved our data warehouse to be on top of the lake.
Okay. Yeah. So it feeds, it consumes a particular part of the lake, the part that is needed for reporting and BI.
Sorry, say that again?
The part of when you say on top of the lake, you mean it's going to consume the subset of the data that serves BI and reporting? Or are there other use cases that the data warehouse is serving?
So we ingest all of this third-party data as well as our internal application data to put in the lake. And then we do some transformations, some cleaning, some modeling, and then it's kind of a little more structured in the end. And that's kind of our data warehouse.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm curious, why did you decide to move the ETL out from the warehouse into the lake? I mean, some modelers decide we can load everything into the data warehouse and, execute the ELT there. So what made you make that decision?
I think from a technical perspective, it would have been a lot more cumbersome. The lake is a lot easier to work with. It's schema on read, a lot more accessible as well, and people can choose how they want to access the data. Okay.
So it was basically to streamline the process, making it easier for users and, adapt to schemaless, let's say, sources.
Exactly.
Okay. And at what point did you decide that you needed a data platform?
So we had this influx of data coming in.
Yeah.
We expanded our team to an offshore consultancy partner to help us bring that data in. And then the challenge there was, okay, how can we provide some kind of standardization on the lake? All of these teams bringing in data with all of their different pipelines. How do we make sure the lake doesn't become a swamp?
Right. Yeah.
And so at first we deployed some senior engineers to kind of help consult and advise on the architecture and the tools that they should use. But it wasn't very scalable. So you had a ratio maybe like 1 to 8, 1 to 10. Yeah. So as good as they were, it was difficult to scale.
So a ratio of 1 to 10 for what?
Like a ratio of like one senior advising like a team of 8 engineers.
Okay. Sure.
And so we decided to form the data platform team because the whole point of a data platform team is to kind of provide shared capabilities for multiple teams to use and to provide that kind of standardization through tools and services. The whole point of a data platform team is to scale your data engineering capabilities through the tech and the architecture instead of scaling through people.
Sure. Would it be a fair assumption then to say that the growth in data, which was aligned to the growth in business requirements, started to become more exponential than linear? So you had to kind of take a step back and actually build a function to scale out with the tools rather than the people, like you said?
Yeah, you could say that. And I think we did it around the same time because we did it at the right time because you cannot really build a data platform first in anticipation of like all this data coming in and then have the perfect platform ready. So it's always a little bit of a catch-up.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how does that work now? Is it iterative?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're building the core capabilities of the data platform. So we have services for ingestion. We have data processing through Glue. We're on AWS.
Sure.
We've got some modeling through
Yeah.
dbt. We've
Yeah.
got access control through lake formations. We have an observability platform with data hubs. We have
Sure.
a variety of different tools and components that we provide for anyone who wants to use and manage data.
So you've modularized the functions of the data platform and offered each of those as services to the rest of the business, basically.
Precisely. So the team
Yeah.
can choose to pick and choose like which tool they want to use to get the work done.
Okay. So, I mean, that makes sense when you have that kind of growth, but I can't imagine it was easy because there must have been a lot of transition of organizational structure, personnel, maybe culture, especially because now that you have a team, then maybe there's some expectation of SLAs or deliverables or scope. So what was that journey like, and how did you manage that with the rest of your stakeholders?
So we started providing some core capabilities, like things that were obviously missing.
Yeah.
And then we start to containerize them, modularize them, as you say. And there is a level of abstraction where you then have the user use the tool as they need, and we provide a consolidated set of features for them.
Why don't you talk a bit more about, let's say, the relationship with the other businesses, right? I mean, what's the dynamic like? How do they make a request for you to you guys? How do you fit it into the standards that you've built and then deliver back to them something as per their expectations without overwhelming your team with their requirements?
So taking requirements is a little difficult.
Yeah.
With the data platform work, we have certain features that are exposed to the users.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of infrastructure and architecture that gets done under the surface. So it's kind of like an iceberg.
Right.
Where only like the tip is exposed to the user.
Sure.
And the user might give us requirements based on what they can see or the interface that is exposed to them. And there is a level of interpretation that we have to do from what the user tell us they need and what we need to do.
Sure.
So for example, the user has a query that's taking a long time. They say, okay, can you bump me up so that my query runs before everyone else's?
Sure.
So you could do that, but probably you should look at what the actual problem is.
Yeah.
So then when you get into it, you might find, okay, it's taking a long time because the data is not partitioned or the data is not modeled properly or the data is not modeled properly because there's some tool missing.
Sure.
So then your solution is kind of at that level and not at what the user asked for.
Sure.
So a lot of what we do is kind of interpreting what the user say they need and what they actually need.
Sure.
And what does that mean for our infrastructure and architecture that is below that surface that the user can't see?
That's an interesting point, actually, which is how do you manage or converge the requirements of different stakeholders to decide, okay, this is the decision we're going to make in terms of our architecture, for example, to serve the maximum number of users or the lion's share of the requirements, per se, and how do you manage conflicts between requirements of the user?
Yeah. So with the data platform team, you naturally serve multiple users, so you can't really pick one over the other.
Sure.
You have to look for patterns.
Yeah.
Patterns of pain points, of problems, of things that people want to do, and then look at how we can tackle them together in a more holistic, reusable service or component. So it's never like, okay, this user asked this, we'll target this one, and then this user, let's do a different thing for them.
So how are you kind of partnering with the different business functions to establish that standardization? I mean, are you, let's say, gathering the requirements of each of them, and then together working out, what's the best way to go forward?
For the users, we gather the requirements based on what they need to do their job, which is like analyzing the data, creating some data products, maybe creating some dashboards.
Sure.
And the standards that we provide are more kind of at the top level.
Yeah.
So whether it's like governance standards, data management standards, or technical data engineering standards. And those are things that we kind of provide at the holistic level for all users. So it's not something, we necessarily have to negotiate on during the requirement process. Yeah.
So even though you have a full team for data platform, I can imagine with all of these growing requirements, I mean, you've got data scientists, maybe some ML engineers, there are people from marketing. Are you guys doing everything yourself, or have you invested in some kind of self-service or democratization of data so that users can, let's say, do the analysis themselves?
I think as we build out our capabilities, the next step for us is definitely to provide a more self-service data platform. We don't want people to have to rely on us or on our data team to help them do things. Then we become the bottlenecks for them. But doing self-service is not so easy.
Yeah. What are the challenges with it?
Yeah. So I think when you think about self-serve, the obvious answer is you want to provide a nice, intuitive user interface.
Yeah.
But to do that is a little complicated. So first of all, you have to think about the level of abstraction that you want to provide.
Yeah.
So you can have a really super nice user interface.
Yeah.
But then you kind of have, you can provide a really nice user interface, but then you kind of absorb a lot of the complexity yourself.
Yeah.
So there's this law of conservation of complexity, like within any given system, there's a certain level of complexity when it shifts either from the maintainer, the developer, or the user.
Yeah.
So you have to decide like what makes sense for your use case. Like, on the other hand, like if you provide something that's pretty low level, it might be really easy for you to maintain, but then it's kind of cumbersome for the user.
Sure.
So, for example, we could provide, a library or like a module for developers and data engineers who are already familiar with, code and CI/CD.
Yeah.
And you're fine with that lower level of abstraction. Whereas for a tool that mostly analysts use, they shouldn't need to know like Terraform or infrastructure as code. So then you have to aim for a higher level of abstraction. But then are you able to maintain the complexity that you've now hidden from them?
Yeah.
Because if you can't, then problems start bubbling up.
Right. So to use your analogy of the iceberg, you're basically setting up a bunch of different icebergs, each of them with different parts of the iceberg showing.
Yes,
that's kind of the, let's say, balancing act that you as a team have to manage and decide, okay, what's the right level of complexity to expose to the user, and what are the long-term implications of it in terms of what do we have to manage, what do they have to manage?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're doing that based on, you said one use case, but I would imagine based on what you said before, a collection of use cases where we build a iceberg for each collection of use cases, let's say, for the right audience with the right level of abstraction.
Yeah. Okay. So with each of our service or tool, we look at like, who are our main target user group, what are their skills, what should they know in order to use to use our tool, and they shouldn't have to know anything that's outside of their job description.
Yeah.
But for us, in terms of development, I think we try to start at the lowest common denominator, and then try to iterate upwards as and when it's necessary.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's another challenge with self-serve around ownership. So when you have self-serve, you kind of have this notion that the user takes on some of the responsibility, or the onus is on the user to use the tool independently. Yeah. So when things break, whose responsibility is it? Right. There's, the trend in the industry now is to kind of move towards like more ownership from the user, like decentralized domain ownership. Sure. But if you provide a service and a lot of things are abstracted away from the user, is it right to ask them to own and maintain things that they don't know about? Right. So we're still figuring that one out. Yeah. But again, going back to,
and you're not the only ones. This is an issue most organizations are having now when they get to your level.
Yeah. So going back to the iceberg. Yeah. I guess the answer might be like things that are exposed. If something breaks in that end, it might be a user error. Yeah. If something breaks below the surface, then it might be the maintainer. But from a technical standpoint, it's a little bit harder to do. Yeah, I can imagine. So, I mean, these 3 phases that you talked about, I can imagine it's been quite a journey. And you're talking about self-service being the challenge that you're facing now. But what were the challenges that you've already faced in the past and already solved? Let's say the main ones that you feel like are something that was maybe a showstopper at the beginning, but now you've created a process or to overcome it, and it's not an issue anymore. I think one of the main challenges of data platform work is we're multiple levels removed from the teams that are directly delivering business value. Sure. The teams that are like bringing home the bacon. Okay. For example, so we have a collections and recoveries team. They reach out to borrowers who may have late payments or missed payments and try to support them and see what we can recover. Yeah. And they use data about who to contact, how to contact them, when to contact them. And to get the data, there was maybe some analysts who generated the data. And then even before that, you have data scientists who maybe made a machine learning model to predict who best to contact. So now we're like a few layers removed, and at the bottom we have data platform team who are the ones providing the tools and services that all these teams use. Like we provide the tools for data scientists to deploy their models, and we provide the tools analysts use to create that data. Yeah. So I think that's also why, like, at a lot of companies, a data platform team is sometimes considered a cost center. Right. So it's one of the challenges about like positioning ourselves as an enabler of other teams. Yeah. Not just as a cost center. Sure. And then like communicating the value that we bring to the rest of the business, as well as communicating that to the team as well, so they understand the impact of their work, and trying to bridge the gap between those layers. Yeah, I can imagine at their level of abstraction, they may not be seeing the bigger picture. I mean, common issue that we see with other organizations is that each of those teams, like collections and reporting or whoever, are in data silos, and each of them are using their own tool set. Maybe they're using their own data sets. Nothing is standardized, and then they get a lot of deduplication. It becomes a data swamp, right? And that's kind of the
that's kind of the issue that you're addressing, so that they maybe don't see it, but it is a core function and it is a necessary enabler. Otherwise, you wouldn't have built a data platform by itself. They'd all be by themselves, still figuring out their own set of tools, etc. So you mentioned, machine learning, right? How has that influenced your business, and has it changed the way you're doing things on the data platform side?
So what we had before was a pretty custom application. I think one of my colleagues called it an enigma wrapped in a mystery. So what we wanted to do as a data platform team is to provide data scientists the tools to self-serve and deploy their models and be able to iterate on that faster without the help of other teams. And so we've been building out our tool set, kind of the MLOps tool set, to help them with that. And now we can see like they're making models a lot faster and looking at more business use cases of where they can add value.
The use of machine learning, right? Because each one is directly tied to a use case. Is that bringing the data platform team and what you guys are doing closer to what the business and the data scientists are doing?
Well, again, it's kind of like multiple layers, right? So we have the data scientists who are targeting specific business use cases, but they are using our tools, which we provide to multiple data scientists. So it is still a little one layer removed.
Right. But in terms of what you were saying about a cost center, with the data scientists building out those business cases, they wouldn't have been able to do it without the platform. So the case for enablement becomes much clearer. Right?
Yes, definitely. And I think it helps to show some metrics around that, like how many more models we have now. And that can show the nature of self-serve and the extent of it.
Yeah, especially if you have, let's say, a lot of model reuse, or you have a feature store and that's providing that self-service to the data scientist so that they can invest once in the platform and then continue to gain value from the same data set, from the same data platform going forward.
Exactly.
And then they just, let's say, you can almost even measure the additional compute per use case, right? And calculate the ROI for that, for them, to prove out the value of each use case. And that makes it easier and faster to roll out a use case factory, basically, which is kind of the engine. The data platform is the engine for that.
Yes, that's definitely where we're trying to get to.
Okay. So I think you're pretty far in that journey, right? Going through all of these phases, and these are a lot of hard-won lessons. What key pillars of success for other technology leaders who are just starting to build their data platform out would you give?
I think looking back at our journey, change is inevitable. So we need to be able to change and be adaptable. I hear this idea sometimes from engineers like, oh, we spent like X months making this. Should we just get rid of it and move to the new thing? But I think that's just the nature of software development. Business requirements change quickly, even like developments in the tech industry change. There's new tools, like new stack, open source things coming out. And I think you'd be left behind if you didn't adapt to those new things.
So adaptability is key.
Exactly.
Right? And how would you advise, let's say, any technology leader who's trying to get buy-in for that kind of thinking to go about it in an organization which is maybe not so ready to adapt?
I think you have to be able to communicate the business value of the technology or the architectural change that you're making. And because it is like a few steps removed, being able to communicate that easily to a non-technical audience, right, to the rest of the business. And help them understand like the new opportunities that can arise when you move to this next step. Like, for example, we we could have put stuff in the data warehouse and tried tuning it and like making it more efficient, but then we won't be able to move to the next like phase of the evolution and move forward, right?
So you have to take that leadership role and tell them that, okay, whatever we're using now, it's made us successful so far. It's not going to make us successful going forward. So we need to be bold enough to re-architect or restructure or change the way that we do things to adapt to the new business needs. Just like you moved from the data warehouse to the data lake, and then from the data lake to where you're going now, which is the self-service platform and the machine learning platforms that you built. And now building out, a governance center of excellence for the whole organization, basically.
Yeah, I think we're at the precipice of a new phase.
Okay.
This decentralized domain ownership. And so self-serve is very important, but also what you mentioned, like having that federated governance, like that central oversight, so that when you have all of these teams using your tools, managing data, using data, you can oversee and make sure things don't get too messy.
Sure.
And have governance over the standards, the way people do things. Yeah.
Lin, this has been great. I think you've shown under the covers what it's like to transition from, just having certain reporting requirements into a full-fledged data platform for a modern fintech. So I think a lot of people can learn from this, and it was great having you on the show. Appreciate your time.